the fires we're cast upon, on the flames we shall become. I believe in a common calling, where our temples pray as one. I believe in the word of wonder and a kingdom for the...
Larry Pollock from Underground Performance Gym, Hardcore Training Gym in Ventura, California. I'm here today with IFBB Pro Phil Williams. Phil was a upcoming and actually a great pro back in the 80s when I started competing. He won the 83 Open European Championships in 1984, USA Championships overall, 85 NPC National Championships overall. And then in 88, he won the IFBB Chicago Pro. He also, in the process of that, beat top competitors like Lee Labrada. I know it was Gary Stridham and a bunch of other names.
Well, actually, Lee Haney in 1979. And then 4 months later, he beat all of us in the Teenage Mr. America.
So there you got it. He was one of the top pros back in the day. And interesting enough, we actually started, well, Phil obviously started a few years before me, not training wise, but competing. I started competing. No, actually I did start competing in 83.
Oh,
just as a teenager. And then 84, I won the USA's, Junior USA's. And then 85, I took second to Sean Ray at the Teen America. That's when you won the nationals.
84, I won the NPC USA overall.
Right.
And I beat Gary Stridham and Lee Labrada, which was a good show.
Right.
I mean, none of us were known at that time.
And you had an interesting story about what happened then that back then, it was really hard to get a pro card. I won the USA and I didn't get a pro card, and he won the USA and he didn't get a pro card either. He had to go to the World Championships to try to get a pro card after winning the overall at both the USA and the Nationals.
Correct.
And then I'll let you tell the story about what happened there.
Well, I mean, it's a crazy story. What happened in 84 in Vegas, Rich Gaspari beat Joseph Gromelis in the pose down, which wasn't supposed to happen. So it was a bit political.
Mm-hmm.
A year later, in my hometown, my home country, Sweden, I was living in Sweden at the time with my first wife. It's a long story. It's kind of crazy, but I had friends that were Swedish judges, and they told me after the prejudging that they marked you down deliberately so Gromelis would win. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, you're not going to win. And I broke my heart, to be honest with you. And of course, I ended up taking second place to Joseph, which I think I should have or could have won, but they deliberately marked me down so I couldn't catch up.
Well,
on points.
I actually watched that 85 Universe video last night.
Okay.
The whole thing.
Right.
And there was no way that guy was beating you.
Wow.
I'm like not biased in this because I have no horse in this race, but there was no way that guy was beating you.
I didn't think so either, but at the same time, there is politics in bodybuilding. It's not like boxing where you knock a guy out.
Right.
Right. So
I'm just saying overall, you were more aesthetic. You had better structure. You were bigger than him.
Well, thank you.
More conditioned. I mean, there was no comparison. I could not see how he beat you.
Well, I mean, I thought so too. And so did most people that I spoke with after that show. But it is what it was. That's history.
Yep.
It's ancient history now.
But I mean, you went on and competed in the pros, and interesting. I didn't even know this till I was doing some research last night. You actually took on the high intensity training principles from Mike Mentzer,
Exactly.
which is something that I did. I actually trained with Mike, and I lived with him. He was my roommate for a year when I was 19 years old, getting ready for the Teen America. And I trained with him for like most of that whole year. And so I've been doing that heavy duty training the whole time. But you took it and you put like your own little spin on it.
Yeah, my spin is a little different. I'm not a strong guy, right? I mean, I'm not super strong. So I use moderately heavy weights, but I train to failure. And then I went from training each body part, trying to twice a week, to 1 day a week. So I trained each body part every 6 to 7 days in the 70s and 80s.
Right. And this is when most people were following the Arnold program, training the
6 days, right?
2 times a day and 6 days a week, and body parts twice a week.
Right.
And basically a lot of overtraining.
Very much overtraining.
Right. And you actually mentioned as the years have gone on, you've actually extended the training out so you have more recuperation even.
I train each body part now 3 times a month. So every 10 to 11 days. That's all I do. And I'm not going to gain size now at 64, right? So I train to maintain what I have. I train my butt off just to maintain what I already have.
I'm pretty much in the same place as you, just trying to hold on to what I've got. But actually, I was training each body part once a week, including legs, until just recently, because I had to go out of town because I was coaching a client at a show one weekend, and other things came up, and so I ended up training my legs every 10 days, and I did that for, I want to say, 2 months. And I actually made progress over training them once a week. So I realized that the way I trained, the intensity, I wasn't recovering even once a week from that training. I needed a full 10 days to get the recovery.
Sure, I believe that 100%. At my age, recovery takes a while. I mean, 64. So if I train each body part 3 times a month, that's about training each body part 10 to 11 days. And recovery, I mean, my legs are sore from one workout to the next.
Yep.
I'm still trying to get over. If I train the whole body, I tell you what I do. I train, let's say I do legs 1 day. I take 3 days off. I train chest, shoulders, triceps, 3 days off. I do back, biceps, calves, 3 days off, and I do legs again. And that's all I can do at this point, with as much intensity as possible during that workout or during those workouts.
Right.
And it takes that long to recover over 11-day period.
I haven't done it with my upper body yet. So far, once a week on my upper body, I seem to be able to recover from that, but definitely the legs, I need more time.
Absolutely. Well, legs take everything you've got. 100% intensity. I give it that. Even if I'm 70 or 80% going into the workout, I still give it 100%. So I may not be the best on that day that I'd like to be, but it's still 100% intensity.
I had one of those last Saturday, actually. My strength was not quite 100%, but I went to failure on my top sets that I needed to.
I mean, according to life, if you look at life as it is, it's stressful. All you can do on that particular day is go in and give it 100%. You may not be 100%, but I give it that.
I've found, and this is just for me personally, if I get my sleep properly, get all my nutrition in like I should, and stick to a really rigid schedule, I'm able to give 100% intensity, and usually my strength is there on just about every workout. But like you said, life gets in the way.
Sure.
Something happens, you end up missing sleep, you miss a couple of meals,
Absolutely.
and there you go.
Wow.
You're not 100%.
But you give it that.
Right. And he has an interesting story, which I can totally relate to. That's very different from people today with regarding to training. When I started training back in the day, I was at Don Peters' gym, and
Don Peters, I knew him.
yeah, he on the in the at the time Lee Haney was training there,
Right.
Gasperi was training there, Albert Beckles,
Oh, yeah.
Matt Mendenhall. So
Right.
I started training in that gym, and then later I moved over to World Gym in Santa Monica,
Right. I trained there as well.
and I at the time I was going to Taft High School, and I was getting ready for the Teen USA and the Teen America, and every day I'd get out of school at 3 o'clock, and I'd jump in my little Honda Civic,
Right.
and I'd drive an hour and a half down the 101 and down the
Wow.
405
Wow.
and down the 10 to Worlds to go train, because I had to train at Worlds, because
Right. Well, sure.
that's where you had to go. That was the place. That's where all the pros were at. And I literally would go there, I think at that time I was going almost every day.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
at least every day after school. Actually, I remember getting ready for that USA contest. I think I went every day. I went every day to Worlds.
Wow.
And I remember I took 2 weeks off of school. I wasn't even supposed to. I ditched school for 2 weeks right before the USAs, because I just was so brain dead from starvation
Right.
and getting in prep that I just had to get to the contest.
Sure.
But luckily I won, and so the school said it was okay because I won the show. But he has a crazier story than even mine.
You won't believe this, and it's as crazy as this sounds. I used to drive from Kansas City, Missouri, on a Friday after school. I would get out of school about 2:35. I'd get on the road, and I can't believe my parents allowed me. I would drive 365 miles plus. That's border to border. That's not in the city, right? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I would go to George Turner's gym, because I met George when I was 17. I took second in the Mr. Missouri when I was 17 years old. I was still in high school. And I used to drive there, train, sleep in my car in front of the gym, get up the next morning, train again, go back to my car. I had nothing else to do, right? I'm in St. Louis. It's a strange city to me. I would train in the evening, sleep. That would be a Saturday. Wake up Sunday morning, train, and drive back to Kansas City to be in school at 7:35 in the morning on a Monday.
And that's what we call dedication. And
I think it's madness.
yeah,
At this point. I mean, it's more than being dedicated. It's
but you know what? That's where we were at back then. It was I remember getting ready for my shows, especially when I was getting ready for the USAs, and as a teenager, and I was thinking, I'm representing World Gym here, and I'm not gonna.
oh,
I've got to give it my 100%.
absolutely.
And I was training really, really hard from 16 when I won my first show.
Oh, wow. At 16.
Yeah, I won my first show at 16, and then I kept winning the teenage shows until I ran into Sean Ray at Teen America.
Oh, wow.
And,
Okay. I won my first show at 18. It was the Teenage Mr. Coastal USA. Now, believe it or not, I beat Lee Haney 4 months later, and I trained my ass off for the Teenage Mr. America. He came, and I ended up in 5th in the medium class, and he won the tall class and the overall. And after that, I chased him because I said, I'm going to get him back. Right? 8-time Mr. Olympia. He won the the America, the universe. And then after that, 8-time Mr. Olympia.
Well, I know I actually trained with Lee and Don Peters' gym
Oh,
and
okay.
at Worlds
Wow.
back before I met Mike Mentzer.
Right.
Yeah, he was something else.
I'll tell you a story about Mike Mentzer. I met Mike at George Turner's gym in 1978. I was still 17. He took me through a workout. He stayed for about 10 days. George took care of him, and he took me through workouts. And I said, oh, wow. I said, okay. So I started training according to what he taught me. I mean, I'm not, like I said, I don't train super heavy. I train with moderate weight, but I train super slow with high intensity,
Right.
and to as close to 100% failure as I can go. And I trained with him, and I stayed with that ever since. And then in 1981, Ray Mentzer and I met. We became good friends. We used to hang out together. And Ray said, Phil, you got great potential. And actually, I mean, I'll make a long story short. Samir brought me to California because he guest posed in 1977 for George Turner. He and Danny Padilla. And Samir said, you got unbelievable potential. He goes, you're going to be one of the best pros. And I'm at 17. I thought, I'm going to be a pro. And of course, at 20, 3 years later, I moved out to California, lived with him for 6 weeks. And then from there, started training at Gold's and World Gym when it was on the first World Gym. Do you remember where it was? It was on Main Street, I believe.
Are you talking about the one with the outside deck?
Yes.
Yep, that's where I trained.
Yeah. I started training there with him.
What year was that?
Oh my God, it had to be 1981. It was before it moved to Venice.
Okay.
So this is Santa Monica,
Right.
if I'm correct, right?
Yeah.
And so I trained there. And then from that point, when it moved, I went over. I used to walk from Gold's Gym, where it is now, to World Gym, where it, remember, you used to walk up the stairs? Yeah.
Yeah, I trained at Don Peters, and then I started going to Worlds. Well, I went from Don Peters to Steve Davis gym for a little while.
Okay, I know Steve Davis.
Yeah. So he had a gym in Panorama City.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And the reason I went from Don Peters gym to Steve Davis gym is because Don kicked me out of the gym. He came to me. I was still a kid. I was 15 years old.
Wow.
And I was training like a maniac. And he comes to me and he says, like, you're doing it wrong. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, you're supposed to go slow and, do it like this. And I said, you see that big guy right there? And I pointed to Bertle Fox.
Oh, Bertle.
And Bertle was a beast.
Oh, God knew Bertle real well.
And I said, well, see, I'm not trying to get like you. I'm trying to get like that guy. And he's not training like you are telling me.
Right.
He's lifting really heavy
Bertle
weights.
trained heavy. Oh,
and so I'm trying to do like what he's doing. He didn't like that. So he kicked me out of the gym.
Right.
And I actually sued him we went on People's Court and I won.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I went to Steve Davis gym for I think I was there for maybe a few months. And when I won my first contest with Mike Sable.
I remember Mike.
Yeah.
Mike's a good friend of mine. We were with Super Spectrum. I mean, you may not believe this. He and I used to do seminars together for Super Spectrum. It wasn't a monthly contract. I got paid for each stop or seminar that I did. It wasn't like a monthly contract where you can sit back on your butt and wait for a check to come in. We had to work.
Right.
So Mike Sable and I became very good friends.
So yeah, he was my first coach for my first contest when I was 16.
Wow. Is Mike still around?
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's around. Yeah, he's with Pro PTA with Joe and Tori.
Oh, please tell him hello.
Yeah,
he'll remember. He can tell you stories about this.
He's out of Woodland Hills right now.
Still in, okay.
Yep, still training people.
Right. Wow.
So yeah, I trained with him for my first show. And then after that, I ended up going over to Santa Monica to train at Worlds. And I was training down there with Gasperi and Haney. And at the time, Samir was training there.
Right.
Pretty much everybody was training there. Padilla.
During that period. Yeah.
Almost everybody. Tom Platts trained at Gold's. Mike Christian trained at Gold's.
Right.
But everybody else was training at Worlds.
I used to go back and forth, and I'd see the guys you mentioned. I'd see them in both as far as I can remember, but I did the same thing.
But mostly it was like the Mike Christian camp at that time was at Gold's, and the Lee Haney camp was at Worlds.
Right.
And yeah, so I trained there up until I met, and I trained there when I won the Junior USA and took second to Sean in the Teen American when I was 18.
Right.
And then I met Mike. So when I tried to train with Mike, we used to go to Gold's, but we didn't train there. We actually trained at a Nautilus Center.
Oh, okay.
He liked to train. We trained at a Nautilus Plus in Studio City.
I like Nautilus equipment. I used to train. There used to be a Nautilus gym in Port Hueneme in '83. I moved there because of a buddy of mine, and I used to train at a lot. I actually worked there as well. Trained and worked at a Nautilus Center.
In the Nautilus Plus?
It was.
There was a chain of them called Nautilus Plus.
I don't believe it was called that. If it was, I don't remember, but I trained there in the like '83 going into the '84 NPC USA.
Right. Well, there was a chain of them. They had all Nautilus equipment.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember Nautilus was big.
By the way, those of you guys who know, Phil is actually a member of my gym, and we have original Nautilus equipment.
I love that pullover. One of the best pieces Arthur Jones designed is that pullover machine.
Yep, nothing like it.
Nothing like it. My lats, that's how I developed. I would say my back development is because basically of Nautilus pullover machine.
And by the way, if you see videos of Phil's back, he has one of the best backs pretty much all time, and especially back in that era.
Yeah, during that era, yeah.
Yeah. Your lats are just super wide.
Well, I mean, I'm lucky it's genetic because I have a low lat tie-in that goes down to my waist. So, I mean, genetically, I was very gifted. And I'll tell you why I got into bodybuilding. This is a long story. I'm going to make it real short. I was bullied by the time I was like 6 until I was 14. At 14, I said, I paid 50 cents a day for protection fees to a gang of boys that used to beat me up. And they beat me up for years. And of course, my father, this is a long story too, I'm going to make it short, was a professional boxer in the 30s and 40s. He had a record of 31 wins, 1 draw, and 0 losses because the mafia, the Italian mafia, ran boxing back then. And because they didn't sign with him, he wasn't able to get a title fight.
That's interesting. And you mentioned in one of your interviews that you have some autism going on.
Yeah, I rock a lot. I mean, I don't like people in general. It's this is part of the autistic trait that I have. And yeah, I mean, I've always had autism. So I was kind of a weirdo. Still am, to be honest with you. I mean, my wife says, she goes, your autistic traits show up today. And I'm thinking, well, sorry. What can I say, right? But yeah, I do have autism.
But you pretty much overcome it. I mean, as far as you were able to go on to be a world champion bodybuilder and do a lot of things in life.
Yeah, I mean, autism has an umbrella, and I'm not in the center. I'm not the worst, but I'm on the outside of it, if that makes sense.
Right.
And I did over time learn to control a lot of the traits that I have. I mean, in general, I mean, I toured with the Rolling Stones. I toured with Mick Jagger. I toured with David Bowie. I toured with what's the guy's Freddie.
Mm-hmm.
Remember him?
Yep.
I toured with them. I didn't like it, but I focused on them and not the people, not the crowd.
Right.
I don't like crowds. I don't like a lot of people in general. I mean, that's part of the autistic trait that I have.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I never had a paying contract my whole bodybuilding career with anyone, not paying, right? So I used to work 40 to 60 hours a week and still compete and was able to manage to win all these shows.
I think there's something to be said about overcoming adversity.
Yeah.
Because, people with adversity, I mean, I'll say right out, when I was 12 years old, I was dyslexic, and I was in a special ed class in my junior high school. And there was another kid in the class. He was, I was 13 and he was 12. And he was a little bodybuilder kid.
Wow.
And this guy, man, he could curl an 80-pound dumbbell with one arm at like 12.
At 12?
Yeah, he had like Arnold Schwarzenegger biceps.
Right.
And he got me into lifting weights, and I got him into smoking pot. And
at that age.
Yep. And then I remember I read the book Education on Bodybuilder by Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I had that book. Yes.
And I read that when I was 13, and I decided that the pot smoking was not good for my bodybuilding, so I just quit it right then.
Right.
And I went on to continue bodybuilding. And I remember I switched schools in the meanwhile because we had moved. And I ran into this kid maybe 3 or 4 years later on a bus. And he recognized me. I didn't even recognize him. He said, "Man, Larry, you got big." And I looked at him. His name was Mike. And I said, "Mike, what happened to you?" He was all strung out and skinny.
Right.
So he went the other direction. He went full-blown drug addict from bodybuilder. And I went all bodybuilding and didn't take the drugs anymore.
Right. Wow.
But interesting you mentioned about being bullied. When I was 12 years old, my parents divorced. We moved from a upscale neighborhood to not such a great neighborhood in Reseda.
Oh, okay.
And there was a family of Hispanic kids named the McIntyres that lived across the street from me.
Right.
And they were the older kids. And they were a few years older than me. So they would pick on us relentlessly, me and my younger brother.
Right.
And then I remember after I had started lifting weights and we had moved, I went back to Reseda High School. I went to a couple different junior high schools. And I went back to Reseda High School. And first day there, this little fat guy comes up to me and he's like, "Larry." And it was Daryl. He was the kid who picked on me when I was a kid. He goes,
Right.
"You got big." I'm like, "Yeah, look how small you are now."
Well, it might have been because of him. And I hate to say this, or I will say it, because of the bullying, I got into martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw a picture of Robbie Robinson in 1975 on the cover of like an Iron Man or a Muscle Builder. I said, "Oh, shit." And there was a kid I went to school with. At a show and tell, he brought pictures of his father. His father was Mr. Midwest. And he said, "Let me see those pictures of your dad." I said, "Introduce me to your dad. I want to be like him." And I bugged this guy. And his dad finally picked him up from school and he introduced us. And I bugged that man for 6 months. And he finally said, he goes, "Phil, I used to knock." I found out where he lived. I used to knock on his door and leave notes on his door. And he said, "All right, meet me down at the YMCA." There was no gyms in Kansas City at the time. No bodybuilding gyms at all. Mm-hmm. There was the YMCA downtown. He said, "Meet me there." And so I met him there. When he walked in the gym, I was there standing. He said, "Philip, I can't believe you showed up." He goes, "What do you want to do? You don't want to do this." And I said, "Yeah, I want to be a bodybuilder, buddy." I said, "Help me." He said, "Show me what to do." And he showed me what to do. 6 months later, well, this was in 1975. So it's been longer than that. 75 to 77, we were competing in shows together. He was competing in the over 40, and I was competing in the novice. And there was no teenage back then. So there was only novice shows. And I won shows. I won my first show well, I didn't win. I took second in the Mr. Missouri in 1977, the short class. And then years later, with Lee Haney at the, I won the Mr. Mid USA in 78 and the novice Mr. Mid USA. So the teenage and the novice, in one night, I won both shows.
That's impressive.
Well, I mean, again, let's
talk a little bit about, what bodybuilding was like in the 80s compared to now, because especially in the scene down in, Venice and Santa Monica with Worlds and Golds. All I can say is you had to be there to understand what it was like.
I mean, Venice at that time, I met kids that came from all over the world to train at that gym. They slept in cars. They did the best they could to live just to train in that gym. And it was crazy, right? Back in that time. And I was one of them. Samir brought me out in 1980 and 81. I stayed in his place until I was able to get a job and then find a place to stay. I lived with like 3 or 4 guys in a one-room, a studio apartment. We all slept on the floor, right? We had a bathroom and a kitchen. We all lived there. And it was actually on Pacific Avenue. The building still stands now. It's blue. If you walk from Gold's Gym, if you walk out and you walk 1 block down, I lived in those apartments with a bunch of guys.
I think I'm familiar with that building.
Yeah, I lived there. It's across the street from what used to be a bus station.
Right. Yeah, but the scene was just unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
You'd walk into a World Gym, and on any given day, there'd be 20 pros getting ready for like Olympia and every other pro show.
Absolutely.
And it was all bodybuilders.
Yep. I mean, Golds and Worlds were a block apart. So if you went from one to the other, you'd see just what you described.
Yep. And everybody was, and not only was everybody training, but everybody was training for competition.
Exactly. Yeah.
Even the guys that weren't pros were training for competitions. So
I'll tell you a funny story. I met Mike Christian. He moved from Portland, Oregon, and he used to walk down the street. I don't know where he lived at that point. And we met before he won the California, the USA, or the Nationals. We met and we became good buddies. And that was like in 1982. But he came from Portland. I mean, Barry DeMay came from Holland. There were guys that came from Germany, Sweden. I mean, you name the country, they were all flock to Gold's Gym. It was crazy. It was crazy. But you'd see exactly what you described. You see the top pros back during that time training, and you go in there and see them, and I think, oh, I used to watch Tom Platt squat, and I used to think, oh, shit. He squatted to the point where it was madness, right? And I used to watch him, and I used to think, and everybody, Samir even said, he's crazy. I'm thinking, if that's what it takes to be a pro, I need to go home. I mean, with that intensity, it was mind-blowing.
And honestly, when I started, I was a kid in the gym. I think I was 15 when I went into Don Peters' gym. And in order to be accepted by the bodybuilders, I felt like I had to keep up with them. And if I couldn't keep up with them as far as the amount of weight I could lift, at least I could keep up with them in intensity.
Intensity, exactly.
And so I was able to train with Gaspari and Lee Haney, and then later Mike Mentzer, because they saw me training in the gym and I wasn't messing around.
Right.
I was training just as hard as them. And I remember training with Lee Haney and thinking to myself, this is Mr. Olympia, and I got to keep up with this guy.
Right.
So whatever he does, I got it. I obviously not. He's way bigger than me.
Well, sure, he's a bigger man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I got to keep up with him, and I did.
Wow.
Because I wasn't gonna. I wasn't gonna let my ego was not gonna let me get like.
Sure.
I knew if I couldn't keep up, they weren't gonna let me train with them anymore.
Right. Well, yeah.
So that's where my head was at.
Right.
That's why Don Peters kicked me out of the gym. He said on the People's Court, he said, when he lifts weights, he makes faces and he screams. And Jed Whopper, he says, you mean like when a tennis player hits the ball and he goes, yeah. He goes, yeah, like that. He goes,
Right.
come back, I'll give you my decision.
Right. Wow.
But yeah, I was training hard from like the get-go, because the first actual bodybuilder that I saw train was Bertle Fox.
Oh, Bertle was
And
super
he was
strong.
He trained like an animal.
I remember Bertle.
I remember, and the first time I walked in Don Peters' gym, this is not racial, but I saw this figure that he was facing the other way with, I believe they were like 150-pound dumbbells.
Oh, sure.
And he was pressing them overhead in a weird motion.
Exactly. Yeah.
not
together.
No, they were.
I mean, it would be like, I know what you're saying. He'd be like, and getting them up.
Right. And then he had two big white guys on the side of him.
Right.
And it was the biggest shoulders and arms I'd ever seen on anything.
Right.
And I thought to myself, they taught a gorilla how to lift weights.
Right.
That's what I thought. I really thought that's a gorilla right there.
I mean,
and then they took the weights and he stood up and turned around. I'm like, that's not a gorilla. That's a man. That's a big man.
I'll tell you a funny story about Bertle. I don't want to get off the subject, but I met his wife. He brought her over from England.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember her name, but she left him. He was supposedly abusive.
He was.
To her. And she left him for another man. And we did a seminar together in England. And the guy that put on the seminar was a good friend of mine. He had a gym in Redcar, England. I used to live there, and I worked in nightclubs there later on. And me and Bertle went on the seminar, and this guy was so cheap that he brought a horse box, a horse trailer, and he wanted us to sleep in the horse trailer during the tour, right?
Wow.
And Bertle exploded. I didn't say anything. I was shy, and the guy's name was Don Williamson. And I just said, oh, Don, I said, we're going to sleep in the horse trailer? He said, yeah, what's wrong with that? And he told Bertle, and Bertle exploded.
Yeah, you don't want to see Bertle mad.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
And I was scared of him. I mean, I liked him. We were friends. We became friends over time. But at the same time, I said, hey, Bertle, how you doing, buddy? I'd kind of touch him. I said, you okay? And his wife had left him prior to that. And he wouldn't speak. He wouldn't even speak to me. He'd go,
For some reason, he liked me.
Oh, wow.
I don't even know why, because I was just a kid training in the gym.
Wow.
I remember one time he was doing dips, and he had this rack that he'd put with plates between his legs.
Sure.
And they were not the Olympic plates. They were just the pig iron plates.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he had like 20 of them on there.
Right.
And he was doing these short dips.
Yeah.
And with his two training partners. And like a dumbass that I was kid, I walked up to him and I'm like, hey, aren't you supposed to go all the way down? And he just looked at me and he just kept going. And they're like, his partner's like, get out of here. Get out of here.
I mean, the sad thing about Bertle, I hate to say this. I mean, and I think this is because his wife left him. His girlfriend cheated on him in St. Kitts, right?
Yeah, I heard about that.
And you know, he got 25 years
I know.
in prison, and he's released now. And I'm in contact with his son. His sons and I kind of go back and forth on Instagram. Not a whole lot, but here and there. And so Bertle was released.
If you ever contact him, tell him I said hi, because I used to be friends with him back then.
Right.
For whatever reason, yeah, he didn't like to talk to a lot of people, but he liked me.
It's funny because Mike Mentzer, now that you say that, said, "Have you met Berto?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Go up to him and say boo." They said he they said he was like frightened, scared of everything. And he didn't like California
Yeah.
for some reason. And when Joe, I guess whenever their contract was over,
Mm-hmm.
he got out right away.
Well, you know, he was for a monster that he was kind of a he always trained covered up in a huge sweatshirt.
Sure.
And even in the sweatshirt, the sweatshirt was like busting out the seams.
Oh, yeah.
His
of
arms were
course.
so huge. It was like
Thick.
it looked like his shirt was going to explode on him.
I'll tell you a funny story. I was at the 83 Swedish Grand Prix. Berto and Lee are on stage. From the side, Berto blew him away.
Oh yeah.
From the front, Berto was narrow-shouldered, but
Mhm.
thick.
Right.
And from the front, Lee destroyed him. And the back, Lee destroyed him. But from the side, Berto was the biggest bodybuilder I've ever seen during that period of time. And this is before growth hormone and insulin or any of the things they're doing now.
Yeah, he had legit 22-inch arms. And I mean, when I say legit, they were rock hard, striated. And the guy used to do incline dumbbell curls with like 120-pound dumbbells, and he'd bring them all the way to his ear.
I remember that.
Like he'd bring his elbow up.
I remember seeing that.
Yep.
I do remember seeing that. Yeah.
And he had some strange form, but obviously it worked.
I mean, it worked for him. I wouldn't recommend it
Right.
to anybody else. I couldn't do it. I mean, luckily enough, I had no injuries over, I'm 64. I started when so 44 years of training. I've never been injured in the gym.
That's something to be proud of.
I don't train that heavy though, but I train strict and in slow motion form.
Right. I've actually slowed my training down considerably last several years, just for the purpose of not trying to get injured.
Well, sure. I mean, I hate to say this, with age, you have to do that. There's a certain point. I mean, I hate to say this, over 40, over 50, and over 60, I had to change a whole lot
Mm-hmm.
to keep going and not get injured.
Yep. Even in the last 5 years, I've had to modify my training just to work around injuries, actually.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, luckily enough, I've never had any.
I can say, though, with all the equipment we have in the gym, I'm able to do pretty much everything.
Let me say this. You got one of the best gyms I've seen in decades. I mean, I had a friend of mine. He owned the original, not the original Gold's Gym,
Mm-hmm.
but the first Gold's Gym in Oxnard. I had a friend that had one in Ventura. You might not remember that. That was like 83, 84, 85.
No, I never was there.
Oh, okay. But I can't remember. God, what's the poor guy's name? He lost that gym. And then it became Powerhouse, Rural Gym, and
Mhm.
what it is now.
Yeah, legends.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He was a good friend of mine. We still keep in touch.
You're not talking about Noel.
Yes. I'm
Yeah.
talking about Noel.
Yeah, Noel owned the Golds when it was
The
Golds.
exactly. Noel was a good friend of mine.
Yeah, that was a great gym, actually.
It was during that period. And then
Mhm.
when he lost it, it got to the point where it just, what would you say, declined.
Yep. Yeah, after he lost it, basically the new management took over and it just
Exactly.
went to shit.
Right.
And when Legends took over, they got rid of all the good equipment.
I walked through there I went by, drove by. I said, oh, I've got some time. I'm going to go in and see what it looks like. And I don't even know what's what. I look at a machine and I say, what does that work for? You know what I'm saying? Because I'm so old school
Right.
that I didn't recognize what each piece was for.
Well, I'm kind of an equipment junkie, and I've trained in, all the top gyms in the world. But when I set out to build my gym, I actually built my gym with the pieces of equipment that I needed to train on, that I wanted to train on.
Oh, you did a damn good job.
Appreciate that.
You did a damn good job. I love your gym.
Yeah, I literally bought out like 5 gyms over the years that were going out of business.
Oh, okay.
And kept the pieces I wanted, sold the others. And then little by little, I just been accumulating. Like there's certain pieces I just been looking for.
Right.
And I'm still looking for like, I have the full line of flex leverage,
Right.
but I'm missing, there's a flex leverage incline diverging press.
Okay.
And it's just like almost impossible to find. And I've been looking for it for years.
Right.
Because it's the only flex leverage I don't have.
Right.
And there's now a guy that's replicating those.
Oh, okay.
And I just found out, and when I say replicating, I mean, he's making the exact same machine.
He's
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But this is doing like hand welding and all this. And so I'm on order to get one of those.
Do you know Rudolph Panetta?
Mm-hmm.
He was a good friend of mine. I stayed at Rudolph's place for about 2 months, and I trained in his showroom. He had equipment there, and me and Rudolph became friends. We lost touch after I left there, but I mean, he made some great equipment in the late 80s and 90s, but now I see his equipment now, and it's kind of similar to what I described earlier. I don't know what's what anymore.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the new equipment anymore.
Neither am I. I don't know what it's for.
It's not even just that. They just don't build things like they used to.
I agree with you 100%.
I mean, like you mentioned the Nautilus pullover. That Nautilus pullover weighs 1,000 pounds.
Oh, by itself. Sure.
Yeah, 1,000
Sure.
pounds. So to manufacture that and to move it, no one's going to build a piece of equipment like that anymore.
I agree with you. They're now plate loaded. I would imagine a lot of them are.
Yeah.
That one, yours is the pin loaded.
Right.
We had a friend of mine and he's a millionaire. We had a gym in Kansas City, Kansas, or Overland Park, Kansas. And we bought the Nautilus pullover, the plate loaded, the original.
Right.
And oh, I love that machine.
I like the one we got with the cams.
I mean, yeah, that's a great machine.
Super smooth.
I use it every back workout.
And I will say, I've had that machine. I got it from an old-time bodybuilder. This old-time bodybuilder passed away down in San Diego about 15 years ago. And I bought all of this equipment.
Oh, okay.
And that's where I got that Nautilus equipment.
Right.
And I got some of those other pieces that like the handmade stuff.
Sure.
Have you seen that the tibialis machine that I have, the Big Dipper? Like those were handmade by this old-time bodybuilder.
Sure.
You'll never see them anywhere else because
Right.
it's like one of a kind.
I'll tell you a funny story. Do you know George Turner? Have you heard of him?
Mm-hmm.
George used to have an equipment. George had a great gym. It was an old Kroger store. That's where I used to drive to from Kansas City to St. Louis to train in his gym. And George and I became friends. He let me move into the house with him. And I lived with him for like 6 months until it got to the point where he was mad.
Right.
He suffered from, I don't know what he suffered from, but he was crazy. And there's a bunch of old stories about George. George used to make equipment in the back of his gym. He'd say, Phil, come here, try this. What do you think? And it would be like a leg curl machine, a leg extension. And he'd try it. And he said, you like it? And I said, oh. He goes, oh, I manufacture that. And he had 2 old guys, 2 old hillbillies from some parts of Missouri that used to build the equipment. And he semi-designed it and used to sell equipment from the back of the gym. And George, actually, he had the same line of equipment or the same blueprint or copy that Joe Gold had. And then later there was a guy, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. They both manufactured all the same design of equipment.
Right.
And so George was one of the best gyms in the world in the 70s. No one knew outside of the people that would come in to see it, but it was better than Gold's gym, There was no world gym at that point.
Mhm.
It was one of the best gyms in the world at that time. So we're talking about the 70s.
I think you know, things have changed in bodybuilding as far as in our day, it was all about the training.
Yeah.
And there was PEDs,
Of
but
course.
we looked at them as like supplements.
Exactly.
We looked at PEDs like you look at protein powder. It was a supplement.
Supplement.
It wasn't like the main part of bodybuilding. It was a supplement to help.
Well, I mean, in my time, it would be, and this is what I learned from George, 12 weeks before a show. I'll tell you this, if you don't mind me saying,
Go ahead.
I take 1 cc of test, that's 200 milligrams, 1 cc of primobolan, and maybe up to 20 milligrams a day of Anavar. But you'd build up to that and build down. So 6 weeks up, 6 weeks down. You'd stay the same. A week before the show, no more injections. And the Anavar you'd take out 5 days before a show, believe it or not.
Mhm.
And that was all I did my whole bodybuilding career, never more than that.
Well, I think a lot of people don't realize that your body can only use so much of that stuff.
Well, I was told back in the day, the more you used, your receptors would get used to it and you wouldn't respond anymore. So they said, George told me this. He said, 12 weeks is all you need before a show. Other than that, don't take anything.
And people today, they don't believe that. They just don't believe it, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
I
believe
never,
that.
The dosages and things that people take today, we never even thought about that back then.
Oh, no. I've heard ridiculous. I don't know if it's true. I've heard rumors that it's off the charts.
Hey,
man.
I have a guy messaged me just earlier on the way here. He's not even a competitor, and he's on a gram of tests a week. And he's asking me why his blood pressure is high. I'm like, well, maybe it has something to do with the gram of tests that you're taking.
Right.
Like, I don't know who put that out there, but he's like,
Right.
people just think, well, you got to take a gram of tests. It's like,
I don't know.
and I'm like, okay, what makes you think you need that much?
I don't know. To be honest with you, I'm kind of out of that part of it.
Mhm.
I mean, I've done podcast, the most muscular podcast I've done with Ian Harrison, JP Fuchs,
Mhm.
and there was another guy. Oh, the guy from Canada, the little short dude. I can't remember his name. His name escapes me right now.
Short dude from Canada,
Yeah, he's short.
pro bodybuilder.
Steve Brisboe.
Oh, okay.
You remember him?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we talked about this, and it's like, how can, I mean, I don't know how you can afford, I mean, I'll say this about my bodybuilding career. If I was able to make the money that I spent doing it, and I'm not talking about drugs, I'm talking about just doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I broke even, I did pretty well
Right.
without any money coming in out of what I made to put into it.
So you're saying if they could, you could afford what?
I don't know. I don't know how they can afford to do. I wrote a letter. I'll say this. I had what's the guy's, Chad Nichols.
Mm-hmm.
I contacted him because Wayne D'Amelia told me, right? Remember Wayne D'Amelia?
Yep.
He said, if you don't get more size, you're not going to place. He goes, you need to put on 15 to 20 pounds of muscle. I said, how am I going to do that? He said, what do you take? And I was at his house in New York. I told him just the same thing I told you. He said, well, that ain't shit. He goes, you're never going to place again. I said, oh, it's kind of messed my head up, right? And so I contacted Chad Nichols, and I said, Chad, what do I need to do? And he sent me a sheet of, he mailed me a list of all the stuff I needed to do. And I looked at it, and there was stuff I never even heard of. And I said, well, How much does that cost? And it was like tens of thousands of dollars. And I said, well, that's unaffordable. I can't do that. So I just left it alone. But I competed in 92 and 96 with what I told you I took, and was lucky to place. But these guys, I looked at guys like Jean-Pierre Fuchs, and I looked at Paul Dillette, and I said, oh, shit. I walked around them. I said, oh, my God. I looked at him. I said, oh, I feel like a little boy up here. And that was it, man. That was it for me.
Yeah, they were Paul Dillette. He was another level of size.
Oh, J.P. Fuchs. I saw him in 96, my last 2 shows, and I just went, Christ. Looked like, undescribable.
Right. Well, I do think there's a point of diminishing returns when it comes to the PEDs, though.
Oh,
That,
sure.
you know, just taking more and more is not going to get you more and more results.
I don't think so. I think there's a certain point when it just, like I said, affects your internal organs, your heart, your internal health. I mean, and look at all the deaths in the last, let's say, 10 years, 5 years, 6.
More recently.
And it's like, what the fuck? And it's like, how do you make the money to pay for that? And it's not the magazines. There's no more Weeder contracts as far as I know. There's no more Weeder contracts, right? I remember Weeder giving guys up to a couple of $100,000 a year. And I'm thinking, oh my God, if I had that kind of money, what would I do? I would, but it's just got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. It's a waste of time and energy competing at that point. And that was after 1988, to be honest with you.
I still think even if you had a limited supply of drugs and unlimited money, there's a certain point where you can only take so much drugs.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
And it's going to come back to the training.
Absolutely.
You know,
and I hate to say this, genetics.
Yeah. Well,
you can
of course.
Genetically, you can only do so much. And drugs aren't going to take you to the next level.
Right.
I don't think so.
No, for sure. 100%.
Right.
I maxed out my genetic potential. I'm pretty positive of that. I got up to, at my biggest, I was lean 245.
That's big.
Man. I was really big. I mean, for my height and frame. So I pretty much maxed out my genetic potential. But to be honest with you, I wasn't taking a ton of drugs.
Right.
At that time.
At that point, yeah.
I really wasn't. I remember I was actually competing in powerlifting at the time because I just like to do that. And that's when I got my biggest size-wise, when I started powerlifting along with the bodybuilding. And Scott Mendelson and I had been training together.
I heard the name. Yeah, I remember Scott
famous
Mendelson.
bench presser. And
sure.
I hadn't seen him in a maybe 3 or 4 months or whatever it was. And he came up to my gym. And I was weighing between 245, 250. And he's like, what are you taking? And I'm like, well, 500 chest, 300 deca, and 1 anadrol a day. And he's like, what else? I'm like, that's it. And that was my biggest ever.
Right.
And no growth hormone. That's what I was taking.
Right.
And he was like, that's it. And I'm like, yeah, that's it.
Right.
So like, well, so what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm training my ass off is what I'm doing. I'm in this gym working my ass off and I'm eating a lot of food.
Sure. Whoa, man. I mean, the biggest at the Chicago Pro, I was 201, right? Up 198. You had 198 and a quarter cutoff for the nationals and the universe in the light heavyweight division. So I weighed 198. Chicago Pro, that's 85, 86, 87, 88, 201. And that was I competed in 96 at 216, but it wasn't, that wasn't a muscular gain. It was just water. I just tried to get bigger.
Right. I've actually done that. I've competed literally in 1 year. I went from like 240 all the way down to 196, way over depleted.
Oh, sure.
And just
Yeah.
looked stringy. 3 months later, I competed at nationals at 215. And then 3 months after that, I competed at Excalibur at 225.
Wow.
And at 225, I was actually at my best condition.
Wow.
So basically what I had done was I had just dieted off
Right.
35 pounds of muscle.
Sure.
And then
sure. Yeah.
over dieting, over training, and over everything.
Yeah.
And then I regained that muscle and kept my leanness. And it wasn't that I gained all that muscle in that 6-month period. I just regained the muscle that I just dieted off.
Right. I understand that. Yeah.
And that's when I figured out contest prep.
Right.
I remember I called Mike Sable. I was super excited. And I'm like, Mike, I figured it out. And he's like, I know how I got the formula for peaking. And he was just like, what the heck are you talking about?
Right.
I was all excited. Like, I got this now.
Right.
And I've been able to duplicate that in other people and competitors.
Oh, wow, that's great. Yeah.
So I just learned the formula of like not my last guy that I trained. He came to me recently. He was like 5 months ago. He was 230 and about, I want to say 25-30% body fat.
Right.
And he just competed at 205, completely shredded, strided glutes, the whole thing.
Wow.
We did very little cardio. Actually, we did no cardio up until 2 weeks out. I had him put in like 30 minutes of cardio 3 times a week.
Oh, wow.
And just kept a really clean diet all the way through. I didn't need to manipulate his diet very much at all. We just set the diet where we wanted to, and steadily he lost the body fat over the weeks. And we did a 60-week prep. Drugs was minimal.
Right.
Never went over a gram in the whole contest prep.
Right.
Even towards the very end, we did push it to the end, and I think he was at like 900 milligrams. And came in completely shredded at 205, won his division.
Right.
And yeah, we nailed that show.
I tell you something funny about shredded glutes. That was never an issue. I mean, I had them in 88. I remember looking in the mirror and seeing, oh, my butt's shredded. I'm thinking, oh, what's that? But Gaspari was it? Actually, I'll go back further. Bill Grant had shredded glutes in the 70s, but you didn't show that, did you? Who would think of that?
They were covered up.
Posing trunks, but yeah.
Right.
Exactly. And the Gaspari was the first one. I saw that and I said, what the hell is that? And I'm thinking, but I had him in 88. And that was the only time, not at the USA or the Nationals, no one displayed that or showed that. It wasn't even talked about.
Yeah. And then Gaspari was the first one to come out
Right,
with that.
yeah.
And then it became a thing.
Exactly. And it was like, oh my God.
I remember I was actually backstage with Rich at, I don't know, it was some show in LA, a pro show. And somehow Weeder let me go backstage, and I was the only one backstage. And Rich is like, help me put on the oil. And I remember when I got down to the glutes, he flexed one side of his
And it
glutes.
just shredded.
It opened up. You could put quarters in that.
I
in the
believe that.
striations.
Yeah, I saw that.
I looked at that and I was like, what the hell is that?
That's yeah.
And I remember when I dieted for that Teen USA, I lived on red snapper, distilled water, and lettuce for 6 weeks.
Oh shit.
Did cardio twice a day, trained twice a day. Like, and I was shredded, but I was like way depleted, obviously.
Well, to that point, yeah, you're going to be depleted.
Yeah. I still won the show because I was the only one in the contest that was that kind of conditioning. But I remember afterwards, I came back at my pictures and I showed Rich. And he's like, yeah, you look good, but you need a little bit more. And I just thought to myself, I almost died.
Oh, shit. I'll tell you a funny story. I'll tell you, this is a real funny story. I've talked about this before in podcasts. In 1988, I flew from Miami to Chicago, and I took aldactone, but I also took potassium with it.
Mm.
And I kid you not, I don't know how I won the show. I don't remember the show. Jerry Brainham, a good friend of mine, got me out of bed. I called him. I don't know how I managed to call him. I said, I feel terrible. And he came up to my hotel room and he brought sodium something. It was a sodium and he gave it to me and I came out of it. Or else I wouldn't even gotten to the show.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people have done that with the diuretics.
Oh, shit. Diuretics are dangerous. I mean, that can kill you today.
Yep.
If you're not careful and don't know what you're doing.
I remember I competed at the Cal one year, completely shredded, and I come off stage after prejudging, and Tom Prince is there, and I knew him from Goals.
Yeah, I
So
remember Tom.
I walked up to Tom and I said, "So, what do you think?" He's like, "I think you got a little film of water." I'm like, "Really?"
Hmm.
He's like, "Yeah. Here, take this Lasix." I didn't even know what a Lasix was.
Oh, shit.
And this is after prejudging.
After
After
okay.
prejudging.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, this is Tom Prince. He's a pro. He must know. So I took the Lasix. I go with my girlfriend and we're waiting for the night show and we're sitting in my car, like outside of that Culver City little venue.
Right.
I'm sitting in the car and all of a sudden it felt like my arteries were pulsating in my legs. It wasn't cramps. It was like my blood was pumping super hard through my legs. And I remember thinking to myself, Muhammad Ben Azizi died from the diuretics. I just took this Lasix. I don't know what this is. I don't know what's going on, but this is bad. There was a liquor store literally like 100 yards in front of where we were parked. I beelined straight to the liquor store, went straight into there, grabbed a pint of salted cottage cheese and a gallon of water, and I freaking downed the whole thing.
Right. And it saved you from.
And I'm like, whatever this is, I'm not dying for this contest.
Right. It's funny. I knew Muhammad Ben Aziza. I mean, I don't tell this story very often. I'm Egyptian. I was born in Egypt. My parents, biological parents, brought me to America. For some reason, my mom died here and I was put up for adoption. That's the only reason I'm in this country.
And isn't it interesting how you went from that to becoming a world champion bodybuilder?
Jeez. Hard to say.
You know, your genetics had something to do with
Well,
it.
absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't say perfect genetics, but near perfect.
Yeah.
I didn't have any weak body parts coming up into bodybuilding. Everything semi grew equally. My back and my biceps were ahead of everything else, and my calves.
Mhm.
I had that genetically from birth, but the rest kind of grew at the same time. I didn't never have any weak points coming up in bodybuilding.
So, you know, the relation I was making is you're Egyptian, and we know that there are a lot of really good bodybuilders.
Oh my God, are coming out of Egypt now.
and the Middle East.
Oh, I see that.
And even over the years, you had Nasser, you had,
Sure.
you know, Samir, and all these people.
And there's guys that now I don't even know their names. I see them and I'm thinking, oh my God, it's got Egyptian. Oh, I mean, it's crazy. It's kind of funny. So yeah, I would say that there's great genetics coming out of that part of the world.
Yep, definitely for bodybuilding.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So we've covered quite a bit of material. I want to ask you one more thing.
Sure.
Upcoming Olympia predictions.
Oh, I mean, I like Derek. Great physique. Great. But I hate to say this. He could easily, if he doesn't peak, be overcome by the guy Samson and the other guy, the Nigerian.
You're talking about
Tall guy.
Andrew Jacked?
Yes. They're both Nigerian as far as I know. even one Samson comes out of England, but he's Nigerian.
Right.
And the genetics there, I mean, plus they're tall and so big. And then, I mean, it's hard to predict, of course, you know that. And then there's always politics. There's always politics as far as I'm concerned. It's never 100%. But I would say Derek could win again, maybe a few more times. But he has to look behind him because these guys are coming up. And depending on what they're doing and how their health holds up, right?
Right.
That's hard to say.
What do you think about Hadi Choopan?
I think he's incredible. I really didn't see him losing. I'll tell you a funny story, and I'll say this, and I've said it before in a podcast. The fact that he's from Iran, and with what's going on in the Middle East, with Egypt, Israel, and Iran, that could make some changes. He may have lost. I don't know that he did, but I thought about it, and I mentioned it in a podcast that we did, that why did he lose? Looking at him, he looked incredible. But did he lose for that reason? I don't know.
I was at the show last year, and I had really good seats right up front.
Okay.
And I can say that after prejudging, I had Hadi winning.
I did.
And then at the night show, I took another look, and I'm like, okay, Hadi has him from the front, but Derek has him from the back.
Right.
And Derek had him from the side a little bit.
Right. Okay.
So I saw how Derek edged him out from the front. It was no contest. Hadi beats him.
Right.
From the back, he was a little watery and a little off.
Okay.
And Derek was just like
phenomenal.
Unbelievable.
Right.
Glutes so striated, you could put your hand in there. It was look crazy. And from the side, he was a teeny tiny bit harder.
I mean, I think you have to be there. I don't think pictures are sometimes.
No, you have to be there.
You have to be there. You have to be right there to see. I thought Hadi could have easily won again. And then I thought, wow, with what's going on in the Middle East, that's...
But I will say this. He came back to that Arnold Classic.
Oh, shredded.
And whatever watery thing he had going on in the back, it was gone. And if you took that Hadi from the Arnold Classic compared to Derek at the Olympia, Hadi wins. So the question is going to be, who's going to come out perfectly peaked at this show this year?
Right.
Whoever's better peaked on the day,
right,
it can go either way.
Sure. I agree with you.
Because Hadi beats him from the front. Derek beats him from the back.
Right.
So it's going to come down to who has a better conditioning on that day.
I agree with you. Yeah.
And it's that close. I don't really see those other guys beating those two just because, at least up to now, we've never seen that kind of conditioning on those guys.
Right.
You know, could it happen? Sure, it could happen.
In time, I would say. In time. It's going to take time.
Right. Well,
it's not going to be this year. It's going to be maybe a couple of years down the road. Who knows how much these guys can change, and who knows how much the guys at the top might lose.
Right.
It's hard to say.
But so far, I don't see them in that conditioning. Now, the wild card here may be Nick Walker.
Right.
Because he does carry the size, and
absolutely,
can come in with the conditioning. And he's structurally not as good as Hadi or Derek. So obviously is just a little bit wider waist, shorter legs.
Sure.
Just not quite the same.
Structurally,
But he has an awful lot of size.
Oh, tremendous amount. What does he weigh on stage? He's my height. Do you know?
I want to say 250.
Wow. I mean, I think about that and I'm thinking he got a larger bone structure than I do, of course, and a little wider here in the waist. I mean, I was lucky enough to I have a small bone structure and a small waist, which was good. It creates the illusion of size. You see me on stage by myself, you don't know what I weigh.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's the illusion of size. But you look at him and it's like, oh, I heard he weighed as much as 265 at 5'6".
I
I'm
seen
thinking,
him off season before he won that Arnold Classic, and before he won the Night of Champions, before he was a big pro. I met him with Luke. You know Luke from their gym.
oh, sure, Luke.
Luke
Yeah.
Carroll.
Nice guy.
And,
Great guy.
Yeah, and I wish he would compete soon.
He said he said he might. I talked to him the other day in the gym.
Yeah.
I spoke with him and said, hey, Luke, we talked. We talk here and there, not a whole lot. I like to get to know him, but I don't want to bother him while he's training, of course, because I know how that is. I don't want people to come up and talk to me.
Right.
My mind is into the, you know what I'm saying, into the workout.
Right.
So we spoke briefly, but he said he's 39. So he said, I'd like to compete. I believe he said he's 39, if I remember correctly. But he's incredible.
Yeah, he needs to. I told him this. You need to get on stage.
I would. I mean, why not? I mean, at this point, why wouldn't you?
Right. But anyways, when I first saw Nick Walker, he was off season. He weighed, I want to say, over 300 pounds.
Oh, I believe that. Sure.
And I remember just seeing him, and you know, he's 5'6".
He's my height. Yeah.
And
300 pounds.
he had this shirt on, and it looked like a shirt for an obese person,
Sure.
but it was full out with muscle.
Oh, I believe that.
I mean,
yeah.
even though he was bulked up off season, I mean, his arms were ginormous.
Sure.
Everything just huge.
Sure.
So I think people are counting him out a little bit.
I wouldn't do that. No.
And, you know, I think he's going to surprise some people. He always comes in shape.
Oh, always. I've seen him. Yeah. He's always conditioned.
Another one is Martin Fitzwater, who nobody saw coming, and he challenged Nick at the Night of Champions.
Okay.
And Nick beat him, but not by much.
It was close.
It was close.
Yeah.
So he's one that I think a lot of people are sleeping on.
Well, I mean, I hate to say this, depending on how their health holds out, we could see a lot of different things happen.
Yep.
But I think the problem is the health. I mean, I don't know if they have health issues or not, or if they have no problems. I don't know. I think that would certainly make a difference, though.
I know I've not seen their blood work or anything.
Of course. Yeah.
So I really couldn't say, but I think that Haney Rombod, at least with his guys, he probably keeps that sort of in check.
I would think so.
At least
yeah.
within reason.
Right. We did the blood work of a lot of the guys that passed away. Dallas McCarver was one. We gave it on a podcast, and the guy read it out. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the stuff was just off the chains.
Yeah.
It was crazy. So I don't know. I mean, I would be scared to be a pro today. I don't think that I would do it. I'm glad I did it in the time that I did. And I was able to do what I did as little compared to what they're doing now. But that would scare me.
I would say like this. If you're young enough, you can probably push the envelope a little bit harder.
Right.
Because your body can withstand more abuse.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you have someone like Derek, who's what, 28 or 29?
That's young. That's still, that's young.
And Nick, he's like in his late 20s.
Right.
And I don't know how old Hottie is, but
I wouldn't have a clue.
But now you have Samson. He's in the 40s.
I didn't know he was that old.
And so is
Jacked?
Andrew Jack.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're both in their.
So at the end of their career, in a sense.
Well, their thing is they started late.
I got you. So they didn't do as much leading up to the point that they are now.
They've only been training for a few years.
Oh, well, that's.
So they started. They didn't even start till late in life.
Yeah.
I think they've both been training for like less than 10 years.
Right.
They're not like somebody who started as a teenager and has been doing this for 30 years.
Exactly.
Still, even given that, given their age, I don't know if they can push that envelope quite as hard. You know,
That's kind of scary. I would think. I think it's scary. That's my opinion. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm no degree in
I
biochemistry.
I can only say like this: if you're an Olympia competitor and have a chance to be the best in the world,
sure.
I could see some justification for pushing the envelope to some degree.
Sure. Yeah.
On the other hand, I see people that they've never even competed, or they maybe done one show and they didn't even place. And they're taking ridiculous amounts of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, none of this is going to help you.
Sure. I agree with you 100%.
They haven't put in the work in the gym, and they're just go straight to the drugs.
I remember guys years ago, decades we're talking, and they come up to me and say, I'm taking this. And I look at them and I'm thinking, you don't even look like you work out. If I saw you on the streets, I wouldn't even know you worked out. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Yep.
And I think, oh, that's more than I ever used.
I see it. Actually, I see
Well,
it a lot.
you see it more than I do.
I have young guys come to me all the time in the gym, and they're like, I want to get on. And I'm like, okay, have you considered the fact that once you start, you're never going to stop because you're going to shut down your own hormones?
Well, exactly.
And you're going to have to be on this the rest of your life.
Right.
And what are your goals? Like, what are your goals?
Yeah.
And I've told a lot of them, yeah, come back in 5 years and talk to me.
Right.
When you actually put some time in the gym and build some muscle.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I hate to say this, they want to start from almost day one.
Mm-hmm. It's like, I did my first cycle when I was 16 for my first show. And I took Cyril Anavar. They were, I believe, 2.5 milligrams.
2.5, yeah.
I took 3 a day.
Right.
For 30 days before my show. That was my first
cycle.
That
was it. Yeah. Yeah.
But I had already been training for 4 years really hard. Even though I was 16, I had been training for 4 years. And I don't mean like messing around in the gym. I was training my butt off for 4 years.
I'll tell you a real funny story. I don't tell this. I haven't told this story I haven't told it very often. When I was 17, there was a guy named Bob came in the gym. He was a pharmaceutical sales rep. He said, come here, Phil. Come out to my car with me. After the workout, I went out. He said, I want you to take 3 of these a day. It was Dynabol, 5 milligrams. I said, what's that? He said, it's Dianabol. And I read it and I said, okay, what does this do? He goes, I want you to take 3 a day until you run out. I said, okay. I said, what's that going to do? He goes, well, let me see if it builds muscle. I want to see if you build muscle. And I took it, right? 3 a day, not really knowing what it was at that time. I was still 17 in high school. I took 3 a day. I went from 154 to 196 in 3 months.
Yep. That first cycle I did on that 30 days of Anavar.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
While I was dieting, I gained about 15 pounds of muscle.
Sure. Let me ask you a stupid question. Does that still exist today? Either one of them? Dynabol or Anavar?
Yeah.
Does it?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but not from like a company that you could buy it from, a pharmaceutical company, and not in those strengths.
Oh,
no. But you can get, like, usually Anavar comes in 10 or 20 milligram capsules or tablets.
Shit, didn't know that.
Dianabol is still out there. Yeah.
Is it?
Oh, yeah.
I'm surprised.
No, everything that we had back in the day is
I remember
available.
Seba cut Dianabol.
Right.
And Cyril was Anavar.
Well, everything nowadays is made by UGLs, Underground Labs.
Oh, I heard that.
So there's the pharmaceutical grade. No, you can't get that anymore.
Okay.
At least not here.
Okay.
Maybe some places in Turkey, I think you can still get some stuff like that.
Oh, didn't know. Wow.
But here everything is UGL. But
I heard everything's underground these days.
Yeah. But
I mean, hear that.
the raws are coming out of China, and yeah, they're still making it. And yeah, you can pretty much get anything.
Didn't know that. Okay.
Now, here's the roll of the dice, though. When you're dealing with a UGL, you better know who you're dealing with, because
I
there's a lot of people selling fake stuff.
counterfeit or I got you.
You know, that's
Sure.
underdosed, or
I
there's
heard
something else in the bottle.
that. I heard that.
Anavar and Primobolan is like one of the two most fake drugs, because
Remember Parabolan back in the day?
Mhm.
The original Parabolan?
Yep.
I had a guy give me 5 amps in France. He goes, try this and tell me what you think. And I said, oh, okay. And I only tried 5 because it wasn't available anywhere else.
Right.
But it came from France, if I remember correctly.
That's correct.
And now they say Tren is something that I heard that's
Well,
fishy or
No. So that was Trent Bologna hex, and it came in a 1.5 milliliter vial, I believe.
right.
And most people took like maximum of 3 of those a week, and there were 76 milligrams.
Yeah, I remember that. It wasn't 100 milligrams. It was lower.
It was
So I do remember
76.
that. Yeah.
So, and Trenhex is a longer acting ester of Trenbolone, so it stays in the system for like at the half-life, I think, is like 15 days. So if you took 3 of those a week, that's like 210 milligrams of Trenbolone, which I'm going to say is a lot and plenty enough to build as much muscle as anybody.
Right.
I mean, that's, I think, like, I can't say this for sure, but this is like Gaspari and Lee Haney getting ready for Olympia.
Right.
Okay. Nowadays, you have people taking grams of Trenbolone. Grams, not milligrams, grams. So, you know,
Right.
it's like, it's insane, because that stuff is super strong.
I mean, I'll tell you this is funny. We never studied drugs when I was coming up. You only used them when you had to, and that was 12 weeks before. And then you looked for what you needed. I had certain things I looked for, whether it was like test. Remember, the other one was the milk base.
Winstrol.
Winstrol V,
Mhm.
and then Anavar. If I could find that, that was all I wanted.
Yep.
But we didn't study that. You know what I mean? We never spent time thinking about that,
Well,
other than just the 12 weeks you needed it for.
I did. Not back in those days, but later on, I actually ran one of the biggest labs in the world. During it got shut down during Operation Raw Deal.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So I ran at the time, it was the biggest UGL in the entire world.
No shit.
Yeah. So I actually did study it
Wow.
in depth.
See, I didn't think it was that important. During that time, it wasn't that important because you only needed it for that period. And then once I used to look forward to coming off.
But even still, because of when I started in bodybuilding, my emphasis was still more on training than the drugs.
Sure.
Even when I had my own UGL, which was
Right.
the biggest in the world, unlimited amount of drugs at my disposal, unlimited amount of money, more money than I could even spend,
Oh, shit.
I still didn't take high dosages.
Right.
Because I knew it wasn't going to do more for me.
Well, sure. But
It
there's a
wasn't-
point where it doesn't.
Yeah, there's
Your
a
body
point of
can
diminishing
only
returns.
absorb so much,
And use
and
so
the
much.
rest goes internal organs, heart, whatever.
Right.
You can only absorb so much
Well, I'd utilize so much.
or utilize. That's
Right.
yeah.
Well, we've covered quite a lot of material today. I don't know how long we've been
That's a
at
good
this.
conversation. I don't know how long have we.
We probably be here all week, actually, because we go back a long ways.
Yeah, we got a great history.
And we should probably do another version of this, because I'm sure we got more stuff to talk about.
Oh, sure. We can go on, like you said. We could go on all day long. And I lost track of time. I don't know how long. we've
Yeah,
been going.
I have no idea. But I hope you guys got some good information here. I mean, this is like real stuff. I mean, we're the OGs. We're
Yeah.
started from back in the day when this was all new and gone all the way through it.
Yeah.
So again, Phil Williams, IFBB Pro, Larry Pollock, Underground Performance Gym, signing out. Don't forget to check out our website, undergroundperformancegym.com. We have HD supplements and Chemex, which are the highest quality nutritional supplements on the market today, all on sale there. And again, signing out.
Hey guys, thanks. It was great. Thanks
Great
for having
having
me,
you.
Larry. Thank you. I
Awesome.
appreciate it.
Land, the blood is rising from